Hello and welcome to Caster Reviews. Today we're looking at the Street Fighter IV series, which, believe it or not, was the first numbered Street Fighter game to release in the 21st century. The prevailing wisdom at Capcom was that they weren't going to make another numbered Street Fighter entry after Third Strike, which is understandable. How can you improve on perfection? Capcom still made other fighting games, mainly crossover titles like Capcom vs SNK 2, Capcom Fighting Jam, and Tatsunoko vs Capcom. At this point, with arcades waning in popularity across the US, it didn't make sense to make a game specifically for the arcades. Regardless, Yoshinori Ono, who was a sound producer on Third Strike, proposed the idea of Street Fighter IV to Keiji Inafune, but it was shot down at first. But then Capcom saw the positive reception to the re-release of Street Fighter II Turbo on Xbox Live Arcade, and decided to put Ono in the producer's chair. Street Fighter IV and its subsequent updates sold millions of copies, and was well received by gamers and critics alike. Without further ado, let's see how well the Street Fighter IV games tinker with the formula that has worked so well in the past. Canonically, both Street Fighter IV and Super Street Fighter IV take place in between Super Turbo and Second Impact. The plot shows that Bison survived getting demoned by Akuma, and he is attempting to regain control of Shadaloo from Seth, one of Bison's many spare bodies. Seth is using Shadaloo's weapons division, the Shadaloo Intimidation Network, which actually does spell SIN in case you were wondering how evil this corporation was, to hold a fighting tournament so he can steal the special moves of all the fighters. As far as the new characters are concerned, only a few have story importance, like Crimson Viper, an American spy who's trying to see what's going on with this tournament. There's also Abel, who is a Frenchman utilizing mixed martial arts, who is also a prototype for Seth. Lastly, as far as plot importance is concerned, we have Juri Han, a Korean Taekwondo practitioner who uses a special eye created by Shadaloo to increase her power. Thankfully, that's not all you're getting story-wise, because once Street Fighter IV ran its course in 2014, we had a whopping 44 characters to learn about. In the B stories, we witnessed the birth of Ken's son, the return of Ken Ryu's Master Goken, and Dudley still looking for his car. As far as the re-releases are concerned, less than a year after the original Street Fighter IV, Super Street Fighter IV was released as a standalone package, which added a bunch of returning characters from Super Turbo and Third Strike, as well as the aforementioned Juri, as well as Turkish oil wrestler Hakan. 2 years later, we were introduced to Super Street Fighter IV Arcade Edition, which was a downloadable update that adds Yun and Yang, as well as Evil Ryu and Oni, a much more powerful version of Akuma. 2 years after that, Ultra Street Fighter IV was released, and that added Relento, Elena, Hugo, and Poison fresh from Street Fighter Cross Tekken, as well as Decapre, another Shadaloo doll who looks a hell of a lot like Cammy. Thankfully, you can find Ultra Street Fighter IV as a standalone package for pretty cheap nowadays, so I recommend that method to try out Street Fighter IV. Anyway, story-wise, there isn't really much other than a short animated intro before you start arcade mode, and the customary ending cinematic. I wish there was some sort of character glossary or database in the game that tells me what I need to know about these characters. I would read the shit out of that. With so many characters, it makes sense. The overarching plot is pretty interesting, but I wish that they explored more on what Shadaloo was like with Bison dead. But no, we have a literal M. Bison clone that gets curb stomped once the genuine article shows up. As I feel like I've been saying throughout all of these videos, I wish players who are interested in the overarching narrative can get something that they can enjoy. This is on the level of the storytelling in the CPS2 and CPS3 games, but fighting games that came out during Street Fighter's hiatus show that you can have your deep, fun-to-play fighting game along with a fleshed-out narrative. While the plot may be lacking, the presentation is overall well done. As you can see, Street Fighter IV has moved past the sprite art and now has 3D character models fighting on a 2D plane. Just about every character's 3D models look great and harken back to their designs from Street Fighter II. I'm a bit conflicted on this. While the character models look great, I think that the sprite work is superior in the CPS3 games. The character animations look a lot more fluid when using sprites, but that's just my opinion from seeing both in action. The reason that I'm conflicted is because with sprites, you aren't able to use all the fancy camera work that Street Fighter IV is brimming with. Whether it be making command grabs feel more powerful, or adding some flair to super moves, the camera tricks that the game uses for some of its animations is stellar. A lot of special moves and UI elements also have this calligraphy effect that also looks really good in action. It's one of those things that's used just enough that it doesn't feel overbearing. The stage backgrounds are pretty solid, but sadly each character doesn't have their own stage anymore, and each stage has its own music regardless of who's fighting. So you only get to hear character themes during the new rival battles. That's another thing that's well done to Street Fighter IV. Ever since the Alpha series, rival battles had an exchange of dialogue which is nice, but here we have fully voiced cutscenes. This is the step up that I wish manifested itself in a cinematic story mode, but that will unfortunately have to wait until Street Fighter V. Speaking of voice acting, every character can be switched from having either English voices or Japanese. A lot of the English voices are recognizable to those who are into games and anime. For example, you made a Ryu's voice actor Kyle Herbert better for his role as adult Gohan in the Dragon Ball series, And Ken's voice, Ruben Langdon, is also the voice of Dante from Devil May Cry 3 onward. The voice acting is done really well, and most of these actors will reprise their roles in Street Fighter V. I do have some problems with the presentation though. One big one is the arcade mode intros and endings. Some of them are literally just one shot that's being panned up with some voiceover and a music bed. For a lot of them, characters who are supposed to be talking aren't even moving their lips. That sucks to start with, but other characters have properly produced cutscenes with lip syncing and everything. If you're going to put the effort in to have more cutscenes, then they shouldn't feel so half-assed. The art style looks solid, but at some points it feels like I'm watching a low-budget anime. The other problem I have with the presentation is lip syncing. Some of the English actors try their best to sync up with the Japanese dialogue, but when you have close-ups for character intros and it looks like an old Godzilla movie, you need to go back to the drawing board. People play these games in English too, you know. Overall, the presentation is great, aside from a few hiccups. The fundamental gameplay hasn't changed much from Street Fighter 3, but as per usual, the biggest changes are to the super meter. Before we get into that, let's get into some of the bigger system changes. First off, parrying is gone and more or less replaced with the focus attack. The focus attack, used by holding medium punch and medium kick, can absorb one hit and causes a crumple state. You can also use it to cancel the recovery of some of your special moves at the cost of half of your bar that can lead into some fun stuff. The other major gameplay addition is the Ultra Combo. These are the super moves that have all the cinematic camera angles. Basically, you have regular super combos that you use when your meter fills up like normal, but then there are Ultra Combos, whose meter builds up after taking a certain amount of hits. In Street Fighter 4, no subtitle, this is called the Revenge Gauge, and for good reason. By the time that Super Street Fighter 4 came out, players are given the option to choose between two Ultra Combos. Ultra Street Fighter 4 introduced the Ultra Combo Double, which grants players access to both of their Ultras but at the cost of lower damage or active time. I love this mechanic. It gives players who may feel like they're out of it a reason to continue playing, and it keeps the best players from coasting to victory, since players can just throw out this combo and get an unexpected win. Arcade mode is the same as per usual, but with a new big boss, Seth. Seth is a pain in the ass at points. He has special moves from a bunch of different characters and uses all of them to personally fuck with you, using Dawson's teleport to warp around the stage, a seemingly invincible spinning pile driver, and a Shoryuken that can be followed up multiple times. Constant teleportation is even more annoying in a game like Street Fighter, since move inputs are based on what direction you're facing. Charge characters are the worst to use while fighting Seth. I can't say he's worse than Gil, because at least he can't resurrect, but I still never look forward to fighting Seth. With the sheer amount of selectable characters, you'll definitely find someone worth playing. The new additions to gameplay give more depth to an already deep fighting game, and make some old characters feel like new again. With Ultra Street Fighter 4, there's a lot of content and characters to keep someone satisfied for a while. Plus, with the additions of a more robust online mode and combo trials, learning how to be great with a character has never been easier. It also doesn't hurt that used copies of Ultra Street Fighter 4 go for pretty cheap nowadays. With that, let's move on to the latest edition of the Street Fighter franchise, Street Fighter V Champion Edition. Thank you for watching this episode of Caster Reviews. Subscribe for more content from me and follow me on Twitter for production updates. See you next time.